You remember this? You know, the garbage format that audiophiles love to hate. But what if I told you that sales of cassette tapes in the UK doubled year over year? Crazy, right? But what if I also told you that back in the cassette heyday, record labels hated them. They created a propaganda campaign, secretly supported a censorship campaign against the very artists that they were protecting. And when that didn't work, they got the government involved. And they were right to be scared, because this was basically the end for the record companies, and I'll explain why later. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the cassette conspiracy, because apparently you could get away with a lot of crap before the internet existed.
And they and local artists could be losing millions of dollars in the flood of pirated recordings.
Mainly what they call here in Australia and all over the world is pirate cassettes.
Piracy in records and cassettes in this country at this time is a tremendous problem. Could well have put us out of business by now. They are not being paid any royalties at all.
Pirated versions.
It's pirate cassettes.
Piracy.
Pirated recordings.
Pirate cassettes.
Have you ever considered piracy?
All right, we've got a lot to cover. It's gonna be a great video. Now, this just isn't about nostalgia and Walkmans. This is about something deeper with the record industry and how basically every new format has freaked them out. We're gonna talk about the history of cassettes, how it completely changed the artist-label relationship, how mixtapes and Walkmans reshaped our culture in the 1980s, why the industry freaked out and what they tried to do.
See.
How supposedly these were summoning demons and they needed to protect the children, and what the heck the government had to do with it. And finally, what this all meant, the legacy of the cassette, and why this signified the beginning of the end for the music labels. This thing wasn't born in some hi-fi symphony lab. It was created in 1963 by Philips, and it was meant for dictation and corporate stuff. Memos, not necessarily the symbol for rebellion and freedom, but because it was small and it was cheap, it quickly spread across Europe. But to be honest, in the 60s it sounded like garbage. They were noisy and hissy, because Dolby noise reduction wasn't a thing yet. And, well, the music industry basically ignored it because it was garbage. However, by the 1970s, things started to change a little bit. And then new tape formulations, especially metal tapes, made the dynamic range greater. High-end tape decks from Nakamichi and Sony started to hit the shelves, and suddenly cassettes became hi-fi. But the biggest game changer was in 1979 when Sony created the Walkman. Because now music wasn't just a format, it was an accessory. And if somebody saw you walking down the street with one of these and some orange headphones on, well, they knew you were pretty cool. For the first time in music history, music wasn't relegated to your living room. You could put it in your car, you could throw it in your backpack. By the early 80s, blank tape sales were in the tens of millions. And suddenly, record labels realized that people aren't just buying albums on cassettes, they're buying blank cassettes to copy the albums on cassettes that they just bought. And by 1983, the cassette was outselling the LP. But the cassette empire would soon fall and be quickly outsold by the CD. This is Taylor Dane. Tell it to my heart. Cassettes really only had about a 7-year reign. Much shorter than vinyl, much shorter than CDs. So why the freak out? Well, because you could fit this in an envelope.
Man, a cassette deck.
80s music. It's cool.
So, once cassettes were ubiquitous, and you could get one of these for not a lot of money, and blank cassettes had a whole shelf at your local pharmacy, people started using them in a way that the record industry never saw coming. Tape trading. Suddenly, you didn't need the radio to play your song. You didn't need a record contract to get your music out there. Somebody just had to press one of these when you're rocking out in somebody's garage. And then they took this, put it in an envelope in Los Angeles, and it showed up in New York about a week later. And in New York, they took this and they made about 12 copies. And those got sent out, sometimes overseas. And then people took that and they made more copies. Now, granted, it sounded terrible, but it didn't matter because there was new music, it resonated with some people, and they knew their buddy needed to hear it.
It's 80s music. It's cool.
And it became a thing. There were people putting ads in Kerrang! Magazine. I'll trade you some Himalayan death metal for your Bay Area punk. And certain bands started to get a little buzz around them. One of my favorite bands, Metallica. Their demo tape in 1982, No Life Till Leather, well, it propagated in the tape trading underground. And by the time their debut album, Kill 'Em All, hit the shelves, they already had an installed fan base. No promotion from record labels. Lars Ulrich himself said the tape trading community was the thing that put us on the map, which is somewhat hypocritical. We'll get to that later. So I might not be wearing this t-shirt today had it not been for tape trading. Indie weirdos the world over were getting introduced to people that never would have heard their stuff. These were bands that were too risky to play on the radio, and labels hated it because the big gate that they installed that was keeping people out, well, it started to crumble. They were the ones that controlled distribution, radio play, marketing, but they couldn't control this. And crazy genres were created. Hardcore, heavy metal, thrash metal, death metal, Scandinavian metal. Well, they never would have existed had it not been for this. People were also dubbing albums of approved record label music, and they were going to do something about it.
Piracy.
Piracy, huh? Have you ever considered piracy?
Pirated versions.
It's pirate cassettes.
Piracy.
Pirated recordings.
In the early 80s, cassettes were flying off the shelves faster than Cooler Ranch Doritos, which were very popular. So the British phonographic industry, BPI, decided to go nuclear with one of the biggest music PR campaigns in history. Their slogan, "Home taping is killing music." And this thing got big. They printed it on record sleeves, on posters, in magazine ads. Didn't really turn out how they wanted it to, though. The US also followed suit with the RIAA, copying the strategy. News media did entire segments about piracy and hit the talking points word by word.
And they and local artists could be losing millions of dollars in the flood of pirated recordings.
Mainly what they call here in Australia and all over the world is pirate cassettes.
Piracy in records and cassettes in this country at this time is a tremendous problem. Could well have put us out of business by now. They are not being paid any royalties at all.
Not surprisingly, the kids who this propaganda campaign was targeted at, they started wearing t-shirts with the logo on it. The Dead Kennedys even left side B of their EP blank with an encouraging note to help kill record industry profits. And there were ads telling parents that their kids' blank tapes were killing jobs, destroying art, and ending culture, which is a bit ironic.
Oh, a mixtape! A mixtape!
Remember when we talked about the Walkman becoming an accessory? It didn't just change how you listened to music, it changed how you expressed yourself. And the mixtape became the ultimate teenage love letter. It was 60 to 90 minutes of carefully curated music by you. And you can barely watch an 80s movie without seeing the mixtape. Lloyd Dobler, Say Anything. Marty McFly, Back to the Future. And it didn't end in the 80s. This is the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack. The mixtape wasn't about music anymore. It was about a feeling. It was about freedom. It's about rebellion. And it's so powerful that 40 years later, it's still being used to signify the same thing. So while the cassette tape trading was launching some artists' careers, others were terrified, and the music labels were terrified. It was about piracy, but it was also about losing the narrative and losing control about how people buy music. With the mixtape, there was a huge shift, and now only one of your friends needed to buy the whole album, and none of you needed to listen to all the filler tracks on the album. At this point, though, the kids made the Home Taping is Killing Music campaign a joke. Labels realized it, so they felt like they needed to up the ante a little bit. So they decided to work with some rich, bored housewives in Washington, D.C.
See.
The Skull and Crossbones campaign was basically a scare tactic, but they upped the ante with this scare tactic. It was the PMRC. To be fair, this wasn't created by the music industry, but they definitely supported it. This satanic panic. Heavy metal music is going to turn your kid into a devil worshiper.
And listening exclusively to heavy metal rock music, you should look further for ritual items such as a pentagram, black or red robes, a chalice or goblet.
And that proliferated through the entire culture of the 80s. Backmasking. Play a Judas Priest or Ozzy tape backwards and you would hear "Worship Satan." And the panic spread quickly. People started blaming tapes for all sorts of tragedies. And the Washington Wives were making this entire thing happen. Their mission? To save America from sex, drugs, and Satan. And this was the delivery vehicle. I have a whole other video about that. I will link it at the end of this video. But they were trying to get a warning label put on cassettes, vinyl, CDs. And they made a big spectacle about it. They hauled artists into a Senate hearing. John Denver, Frank Zappa, Dee Schneider. And it was a big deal. And the PMRC got what they wanted. Their label. But you want to know something funny? The RIAA had already agreed to put label on albums well before the Senate hearings ever happened. And of course, the irony was that nothing sold an album faster than having that sticker on it, because now you didn't need to know what was on the album to know that it was the good album to buy. And Frank Zappa, during the hearing, keyed in on something that was going behind the scenes that most people didn't know about, what the labels really wanted. The tape tax. The labels figured if they buddied up with the PMRC housewives, played nicey-nicey, and encouraged censorship, they could get some of their legislation passed.
Tax-free?
Tax-free. That lost revenue is on you.
This was the real end game for the music labels. It wasn't about Satan. It's about money. The idea was super simple and a little sneaky. A tax on blank cassette tapes. Because you know, all the money that the record labels and the artists were losing.
Piracy in records and cassettes in this country at this time is a tremendous problem. Could well have put us out of business by now. They are not being paid any royalties at all.
Because you know, record labels and artists were losing so much money from illegal taping. And Germany actually did it first. All the way back in 1965. A tax was put on blank cassettes, later on VHS, CDs, and even hard drives. They figured they can't stop people from copying, so they might as well charge people for copying. The money flowed into a collection agency called GEMA, G-E-M-A, which was distributed to songwriters, to labels, based on market share, which meant the biggest labels, the biggest artists, well, they got most of this tape tax money. So the US tried to emulate that, and it didn't work. On June 27th of 1985, H.R. 2911 was introduced, called the Home Audio Recording Act. If the bill had passed and we had to pay a tape tax, it would be collected by the U.S. Copyright Royalty Tribunal, and it would be distributed by market share. But here's the problem. That means people who were taping birds on their back porch were just as guilty as some backroom operation that was cranking out hundreds of Anthrax bootlegs. Everybody was guilty, and everybody would pay, and that's what the record labels were hoping, especially the big ones. Because if you think about it, it's just mailbox money for the record labels. And if it had worked, it didn't matter what you were recording. You were still paying. The reality was that none of these labels were going to go under because of illegal tape recording. That legislation that they were after never got passed. But if the music industry thought cassettes were bad, what came later was truly terrifying. So after all the hubbub, the propaganda campaign, the secret support of the Washington Housewives, and the censorship campaign, and the real scary thing was shinier. It was the compact disc. After the original was copied here, and then this one was copied, and then that one was copied, well, it got to be pretty bad pretty quick. However, with a CD, it was ones and zeros. It was perfect. Forever. When CDs were released, labels thought they were copy-proof, and we all know how that worked out. Now, every gateway computer you bought at Best Buy had a CD drive in it. That led to Napster, MP3s, and some irony here. Metallica, the band that basically their career was launched on tape trading, was now heading up a lawsuit against Napster for people sharing their music. Nothing says rock and roll like hiring an attorney to sue single moms and teenagers. And just like it always is, the harder the labels pushed, the harder the people pushed back. And 10 years later, cassettes started making a comeback. Bands were selling them as merch. And just like in the early 80s, bands were now making their demo tapes on tapes. By the early 2020s, cassette tape sales had quadrupled. Even big bands like Metallica, Lady Gaga are releasing their albums on cassette now. Generally, it's a limited run, and I really only buy them to put them on my shelf. But what's the real lesson about the war on cassettes? It just wasn't about piracy. It was about money, it was about power, and more importantly, control. And the takeaway is, the harder they tried to control, the more it backfired. The war on copying things to cassettes failed. Then it got worse. CDs, because now the music wasn't degraded. The war on CDs failed. The war on Napster failed, because what came later destroyed the music industry. Because in 2007, Spotify came on the scene. Now, people didn't buy their music, they rented their music. And royalties disappeared like a phantom when you turn on the lights. And the music labels lost complete control, because now Spotify controls the royalties. Amazon Music controls the royalties. Artists basically don't make anything off of their music. They make more off of selling a t-shirt than they do from 10,000 streams of their music. So all those royalties that those record labels were trying to protect from illegal copying of their albums, it all went away. Because this little thing right here was the beginning of the end for music as we know it. It created a cultural phenomenon. It launched genres that never would have existed. It enabled the creation of some of the biggest bands in history and signified the collapse of the music industry as we know it. But there is a silver lining. You can go buy these today. And now this crappy garbage format that audiophiles hate, it's back. But it still means something. You own it. And if you own cassettes in 2025, you're kind of rebelling about this digital hellscape that we're living in. So go make a mixtape, not a playlist. If you like this video, check out my other video about cassettes. I'll link it right here. If you want to know more about the Satanic Panic and the PMRC, check this video out. It's right here. Thank you so much for watching.